Tears for the Tear God, Salt for the Salt Throne, and Gas the Leaf Tribe.
Look at this little game changer. All dressed up like a sea captain, while her publicity stunt to sail a zero emissions yacht across the fucking Atlantic actually ends up using more carbon than had she just flown. The price of fame, eh? I saw a little interview with her where someone asked, what do you say to the naysayers, those who disagree about climate change? And she said that she doesn't say anything to them. So not only have they already indoctrinated her into this BS surrounding climate change, they're indoctrinating her into the BS surrounding lefty, we don't talk to you because you disagree BS. This is going to be tricky.
The song of Slanesh. Hear this dirge and despair.
I think the biggest problem is that we're trying to draw conclusions and strategize around half-truths. You'll hear people say something along the lines of, human activity has an effect on climate change. That's true. But it's actually two separate issues, and each is only half a truth at best. Human activity and the climate is changing. Let's start with the climate is changing. It is, absolutely. But that's only half the truth. Closer to the whole truth is that the climate is always changing. It's been changing for 4.5 billion years since the formation of the Earth, and it will likely never stop. Humans have an effect on climate change. Yes, that's absolutely true. But again, it's half the truth at best. Closer to the whole truth is something like all life on Earth has an effect on climate change, in that the climate will push on certain life forms. They'll react a certain way. The reaction will change their behavior, and they'll have an effect on the climate. And the climate will change. To a degree, maybe a greater degree. All movement affects climate change. We've got 300 million trillion gallons of water sloshing around the surface of the Earth, carrying heat with it everywhere it goes, while the Earth hurtles around the sun at 50,000 miles per hour, while the moon is pulling on that water the whole time, and the sun is taking pot shots at us with solar flares pretty much constantly. Difficult to imagine that those cosmic forces don't have some kind of effect on climate change. They used to tell me when I was in grade school, if the planet warmed too much, then that would be the end of it, forever. Well, that was like 30 years ago. And it isn't over. And also what they didn't tell me, and perhaps maybe because they didn't know, was that the planet already is warmer. It's warmer now than it was 2,000 years ago, and it was warmer then than it was 2,000 years before that. And 2,000 years before that, and so on and so forth for 12 to 14,000 years. Technically, we're still coming out of an ice age, and this is a warming period. Oh, but, they'll say, it's warming faster and faster and faster ever since the Industrial Revolution. Sure, okay, maybe. But have you ever watched an ice cube melt? A large ice cube takes a long time to melt, but the longer it melts, the faster it melts. That it comes to a point where it just starts melting away and disappears. Does that reasoning hold with an entire planet? I don't fucking know. And nobody else does either. There's way too many variables involved, and we don't have a control planet to set aside and observe the two. So, I mean, they look at the correlation of the Industrial Revolution and the spike in warming, but correlation doesn't equal causation. So now that we've looked at some of the faulty, flawed premises, let's look at some of the faulty and flawed conclusions people are drawing. Like, in my country, for example, this is a climate crisis, and we must do something about this. Climate crisis, I don't know that it is. I'm not convinced. You know, the planet's warming. It has some negative effects. I don't know that it's a bad thing. I don't think they know for sure it's a bad thing. They, yes. The monolith, they. I mean, there have been some shorter term, and by shorter term I mean 50 to 100 year cooling periods in the history of human civilization. And as far as I know, all of those were bad. Like famine and plague. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the plague that wiped out 1/5 of the population of Europe, that was during a cooling period. So I don't know that warming is all that bad. I mean, the last time the planet was on an extended cooling period, my country and the northern half of the United States was under 2.5 miles of ice. So, I don't know. Climate is always changing, and I gotta pick one, warming or cooling. So far, warming seems to be the better option. And we must do something about it. Now, this is a weird one because it actually implies two things. One, the thing on the face of it, that we must do something about it. Again, I don't think that we do. But also, it implies that we can. Now, if you pulled all the people and all the industry off the planet right now, would that have an effect on climate change? Would it slow down? Would it stop? Would it reverse? I have no fucking idea. I don't think anybody has any fucking idea about that. What I can tell you is this, is that in all the places in the world, say for example Canada, that we've done the most to actually lower emissions and we worry about climate change. If I'm not mistaken, with all the greening that's happened over the past 100 years or so, Canada is actually a net carbon sink as a country. And yet still, I'm also told that Canada is warming 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of the planet. So, what good is all of that if it doesn't actually have the effect that we mean to see? Weird, right? So why are people so up in arms about this when we don't actually know anything? Well, when in doubt, follow the money. Remember, wherever money can be a motivating factor, it is. So, I mean, you see these governments, like mine, for example. They have action plans and stuff to take your money. And they're going to do things with it. Look, here it is, Canada's climate plan. What's in Canada's climate plan? Actions to reduce emissions. Putting a price on pollution. That's called taking your money. Adapting to climate change in Canada. Clean technology, so where some of the money is going. Expert engagement initiative on clean growth and climate change. Huh. Something else I find weird in here. This doesn't seem to be a complete plan to me. This is not... It's largely unfinished. Maybe it's from all my years playing chess, or video games, or basically ever trying to accomplish anything. A plan, a strategy, needs an end state, a goal, victory conditions. Maybe I haven't perused this enough, but it doesn't seem we have any, right? And I mean, it's climate change. The variables are vast and the time frames are huge, so it should be very vague. Like, say, if we achieve A, B, or C in X amount of time, then we can call the plan a success. Anything else, the plan is a failure. For example, if we slow the rate of climate change by 10% over the next 50 years, that seems like a reasonable, achievable goal, right? Except that's not in here. This is simply about, like, there is no end state. It's just, there's a climate crisis and we need your money. It sounds very much along the lines of, we need to avert nuclear war, so give us all your money. And as long as there isn't nuclear war, they can say the plan is successful and continue to take all your money. And I think they want it that way. They want no end state. That way they can continue to just rob you over something about which we know very little in perpetuity. And if I'm not mistaken, other Western countries like little Greta Thunbergs are doing the same thing, and now they're having children do their propagandizing for them, which is fucking gross. Don't get me wrong. I understand the need for things like clean air and water, obviously. And we can take steps to ensure we have those, but I don't think those steps involve necessarily demonizing things like the Albertan oil sands, on which we still rely along with fossil fuels in general, to create the things that are going to save us from fossil fuels, like solar panels and the infamous lithium-ion battery that apparently, over its lifetime, generates just as much greenhouse gases and emits as much carbon as a gas-powered vehicle, because all of our electricity, mostly, still comes from coal and oil. So to charge that battery over its lifetime before it blows up in your garage and burns your house down, you're not doing anyone any favors, but it's starting to sound very much like that religious zealotry and the indulgence of sin because you're being such a good zealot. You're allowed to burn those fossil fuels because you're doing the right thing. I think when I was a kid, the first date that I heard about this was 1989. By 1989, if we don't do something, everything's going to go wrong. And then they amended that to the year 2000. And then it was 2012. I don't think that actually had to do with climate change. But now, 2019, we have AOC saying, 12 years until the planet's just toast. And the leader of our Green Party in Canada was like, by the next election cycle, which is 3 months from now. And then she's like, no, I meant the election cycle after. So 4 years and 3 months, like they're putting the clock on this. And I can't help but be reminded of the Seventh-day Adventists, I think they were called, where some guy in the 1800s did the math and figured out that the prophecy says that Jesus will return, and for some reason in the United States, on this date in 1870 whatever. And all his followers came out to the field, and they waited, and sunset and midnight passed, and Jesus never came. So instead of losing all of his followers, he went back, reworked the formula, and went, I was wrong. It's this other date farther in the future. And was wrong again. And just keeps revising the date that Jesus will return. And I mean, to a degree, it makes sense that it's the same kind of thing, because here we are. Out of the mouths of babes is not, in fact, a scientific phenomenon, but a religious prophecy. And, while I've got nothing against religion, a free Western democracy has an obligation to separate church and state, and we should not be governing by this kind of religious zealotry.
Shred their sanity with our song.
Relevant links to shit I said in the description. Maybe. I'm Irving Twin. Like, subscribe, or don't. It's a free country. At least it used to be.
They would silence us?